Hey everybody, Tim Higgins here, A&I Solutions. We're going to talk about Javelin 101. Now, a few things I'm going to cover is number one, what is Javelin? Javelin should also be the exception, not the rule. We'll talk about what that means in a few seconds, and then we'll talk about a demo. Now, when you talk about Javelin, I don't really want to read this. This came from Broadcom's website, but some of the most important things that you want to look at, Javelin can help you do things through automation. Javelin is truly a workflow, and we're going to look at that in a few minutes, what that means. But you want to use Javelin to go beyond what TDM can do just out of the box, okay? Now, when you look here, for an example, when you think of TDM services, sorry about that, I was choking, getting a drink of water. So when you think of the TDM services, you can do data generation, subsetting, data copying, masking, and find and reserve. But what about automation? What about calling the APIs? What about, generating scripting that can generate jobs, that can kick off masking jobs and that kind of stuff? That is where Javelin comes in and shines. Now, we're going to hop over to the server. This is Javelin. Javelin is installed with TDM. Usually I have to find it just because I don't keep shortcuts that much. They just clutter up the desktop. But this is what it looks like. Now, if we say new, you have to have a starting. And from here, you have all these components. Now, I'm just going to call these components for sake of argument. So in these components, you have a lot of things you can do. So we'll talk about some of these as we go through, but for an example, here's a HANA database connection for SAP. Here's some Oracle, some Microsoft SQL, some DB2. Another good task, here's even Selenium, right? So you can run Selenium scripts. Now, some of the other good tasks that people use this for is also for bulk copying. That's one of the things I like to use it for, and just set it and run it as a file, but we'll get to all that, okay? So let's just start with something simple. Let me close all this. I'm probably not going to spend a lot of time building this out because I have a lot of videos out there on how to use Javelin, but let's just get started. So maybe the first thing I want to say is let's make a decision. Okay, so in my decision though, if you notice we have a red mark. So what happens is I want to come into here. Now in my decision, I want to say if something is true, then let's go ahead and just save it to the database. So we'll go down here and I'm going to grab SQL Server and I'm just going to say execute query. Okay, I'm going to bring that to here and we'll say if true here. Okay. And now this wants information like my server name, my database name, my username. What's most important is these components here. The errors are okay to help you out, but most importantly, you want to look over here. These properties change depending on which control you pick on. And for an example, if I go through here, I may not need all of this, but for the majority, I will, right? Maybe I'm just going to write a query. And we're going to look at some examples. Again, I could build this out. But like I said, I have a lot of videos out there for that. And the honest truth is I really didn't have a plan for this video other than showing you how Javelin works. Now, the key thing here is also you have a password. So people say, well, I don't see the password. Well, it is right there. Okay, it is hidden. The other thing you want to look at too is the idea of variables. Okay, you want to put things in a variable. So maybe DB name, and then I'll put that in a variable. The scope, we'll talk about that in a few seconds, but notice my type is a string. Okay, Boolean object, there's a string of arrays. The data table is a very powerful feature, and I will do a video on that one because that is probably an hour by itself, but it is very useful, okay? So I apologize about that. But so if you think about a data table really is like a CSV version of your data in memory. Okay, so then you can update, you can merge, you can delete, all that stuff. The reason I say that is because I may have a video out there about that already. If I don't, I'll put one together. XML, array of objects, right? Now, if it's something I know that I need, but it's not in there, then I can just search for it. For an example, a row of data, right? So row. Now, one thing that a lot of people don't know is, so I'm looking for data row. So let's just do data. And let's see, I'm looking for data row. Yep, there we go. Notice it's system.data. That's because it's on it's on the server that this is running on. Now, if I need to know information about this, this is the pretty cool part. I can come in here and I can say, okay, tell me about system dot, what is it? Is it Microsoft system dot, oh, it's just system.data. Okay, so system.data, and I can actually say data row. Now, Javelin doesn't accept all these features, but this kind of will help you figure out some things. For an example, this is just programming, but it kind of gives me an idea of some of the things I can do with a row. For an example of this, okay? So those are things you can look at. The other thing I want to show you over here is if you do Microsoft workflow, and let's just do an image. If you can see these images like this one, it looks a lot like what we're building. And the reason being is because, let's see, Microsoft workflow, is it designer maybe? But the point is, this is like this one. This is based off the foundation of Windows Workflow. Okay, now of course Windows Workflow has upgraded it. Now it's not everything in the workflow, but the concept of Javelin, I was trying to find, there was a really good image I saw the other day. Maybe it's Workflow Foundation. Yeah, here we go. This is what I was looking for. You can barely see this because it's gray, and probably time of this video is probably going to be worse. But this looks identical to Javelin. That's because Javelin is built on Windows Workflow Foundation. Now, let's go back over here and look. So here's what it looks like. Now, let me go ahead and close this because I don't need that right now. But just know these variable types. So then I can take this right here. Now, of course, I'd want to put a value in it. But then I can come over here, click here. And what do we call this? DB name. So I can actually click it over here. Or most people look over here and they forget to look over here because sometimes this is kind of like closed, but you want to leave it open. Okay. And then if we go in here and look, database name, I can just paste it right there. Okay. And that's kind of how that works. You really want to pay attention to your variables and you really want to pay attention to your properties. Now, what happens if I got a control that goes a little bit deeper? And if I go in here, and we're going to create a variable here. And then in here, this variable, whoops, wait a minute, let's go back up one. Let's do another flowchart. And we'll delete this one and we'll just bring it over here. Now that's one good thing you saw me do is you can delete these little arrows. So if I don't want to use that one in this flow, but just leave it there for testing. Now, if I change this flow's name to be test data. You don't have to change the name, but it just kind of helps. And then I go down here and create my test. If you notice now, I have a scope of test data. That's a misleading that a mistake a lot of people make, because now if I go back up to here, and if I go over into another flow, you may not have access to this. Now I do because this is the parent, but if you create it in here, and then you have another process, and we'll just put it down here, and we'll say this process runs after this one. And if I go into here, if you notice, it's missing. Okay. So if I go back up to here, if you notice, it's missing. It's missing because it's only scoped to this one. So what you want to do is go in here and change this. What I like to do is put everything at the parent scope. That way I don't have to worry too much about debugging or names mixing everywhere. Now, I'm going to delete this. And one good thing that Javelin does is it comes with these examples. So we'll say open examples. Now I don't want to save that. And here's a list of examples that it comes with. So let's look at a few of these, okay? Because again, this is very useful. So if I look at something append to an Excel, what does that mean? So I clicked on it. So now they're pulling Oracle data. And this is kind of good because this is kind of what I want to walk you through. So they're hitting a database. Now I don't have Oracle installed, so this wouldn't work. They're using the service name, the port, a username, and the user password. Remember, people forget that is going to be over here. Okay, there's the password. It's encrypted, so you can't see it. So we'll close that. And now the output is very important. The output is a data table. Okay, and if you don't know, you can click that away and notice this is output data table, but I'll put that back. So the question is, where is this? So this right here, remember, is going to be in your variables. Right there it is. Okay. So now what's going to happen is this query is going to run. It's going to select all. Now, if I go over here and click this, it makes it where I can actually see it. So this selects all from this database, which doesn't really exist. That's fine. So I hit cancel. And it's going to put all that data into this data table. Now, inside this data table, it's going to be a loop. Sorry about that. And this data table, it's going to now index is greater than this column remove count. And I guarantee it's set somewhere because that's a condition. And then here, they're putting it into this voke method. This is a little more advanced. Maybe I shouldn't show you this one. But the point is, it's doing something there. And then it's right now. And then they're basically cleaning it up. And then they're going to end up adding a header here. Then here is where they actually do the for looping through each one and adding it to an Excel. Now, I'll sped up a little bit because this is a little bit more advanced one. But the concept is I want you to see this control. Some things that people forget about the controls, make sure you look at the properties. Make sure you look at the variables. Also, if you move this somewhere else, you also have imports. Okay? So your imports are also very important because if I move this to a system that doesn't have one that I used, then I would have to make sure the import is there. Okay, that's very important. So if I go here and we look at, sorry, the mail person is dropping something off. So if we go and what I want to do is look at one that I did. Let's get this one. So this one is a REST call. Now, the good, bad, and the ugly, I don't know if I can find one. Let's see if this one works. Some of these you will find, so that's a bulk copy. I can tell by the way it looks. And again, you just look over here, okay? Javelin's not hard if you just look on this side. Keep in mind, this is only an introduction. I do have more detailed videos out there, but some of these, if I go and say open by example, let's just look at a shredder because I know this will break. If I look at one that has a red, this is red everywhere, that means that's a control where the version of Javelin didn't match this version. Okay, that's pretty much what that is. So then you have to find what control it is, and then you have to bring it over and you have to recreate it. So if you see this red, that's all that means. Now let's go back to the one I was going to show you. Okay, now this one, I kind of broke the connection. So let's put it back. What this is going to do is I have this on video, so don't worry too much about understanding it fully. I just want you to know how the flow works. So here I have a file. Over here, there's a file control that allows me to change things, okay, to a file. Now, if you don't know what the control is and you're like, okay, what did he use? You can look right here. So file system activity, file activity. So if I drop all this, you can also do the cool thing of just searching for it. Now, searching for it will not open up. So if I open up something I know it's not in there, oh, there's files there, I'm sorry. T-Dot does not have any files in it. Notice nothing dropped down. But here's the file system. So file system, activities, file system, which is here. So if I open this up, there it is. So I'll bring that over, and that's what this one is. Best practices, you want to rename those, though, to match something useful. So in this case, I renamed it. Let me get rid of this just so I have a clean slate. And I'm going to kind of drop that window in there because I'm not really going to use it. But I am going to use these properties. So let's check in to see if this file exists, and if it does, it deletes it. And then this is going to actually execute a batch command. This is a process activity. Then that's going to run, and it's going to call this REST call activity. So let me delete this because I don't want it to happen. Let me delete this because I don't want it to happen. And then I'm going to bring this to here. This is going to, oops, I don't want that to happen. I want it to come to here. There we go. So again, I'm sorry, I should have left that open for this reason, but if I come over here and look, the REST call, let's go ahead and pin it back. The REST call activity is over here. It's kind of misleading because it's called a REST post is what I'm using. That one's for an RSS feed. But here, once it's post, I can change it. So if I click, remember these properties are very, very important. So when I click on it, it says, do you want to post or get? Now this one's kind of picky. There is very, very little documentation, okay, on these controls. 90% of the times, it's really just a trial and error. For an example, if I get rid of this, okay, I now have an error message. Well, it says, this error message says, I have to have a resource, but I'm not passing in a resource. But what is a resource? A resource : ID. Okay, so I'm just going to pass in a blank string. Okay, and I will say 90% of these are string values. Now, the other thing is I told you this was built on the Windows Workflow Foundation. I may be wrong about that, but I do know that this is Windows Workflow, okay, at least in my opinion. The reason I'm saying that is because you can build VB expressions. Now, I kind of joke and say we're adults. We don't build in Visual Basic, but in this case, you do. Okay. The watermarks, as they're called in programming world, or what are these little tips are here? They're very useful, and that's better than the help most of the time. Okay. Now, this is going to run this activity. I'm going to dump, if you know anything about REST calls, I'm calling this REST call. I'm bringing it back as JSON. It is true. Okay. The method I'm using is get, and I'm going to dump everything into a J array, into this imps, and then I'm going to dump my J object into the imp without the period, without the S, I'm sorry. So if I look at my variables, let's give it a second to pull up. I can see here my imps is a J array, and I can see my imp object is a J object. And again, you would get that by coming over here. And if you don't see it, it's going to show up because I've already picked it. Notice it's Newtonsoft, which is a very common Microsoft JSON control. Well, not really control, but basically a set of DLLs. But basically, if you don't see it there, then you can browse for it, right? Okay, so let me go ahead and close those. And I'm going to delete this one just because I didn't use it. Now, the other things we have here is some XML document. That way, if you're doing a SOAP, I can dump it in zip, but I decide not to. And what I'm going to do there is I'm going to create this file. And I'm just going to dump everything that is, so if I look at create file, continue on error, display the name, of course, override if exists, yes, please. And then I want to dump everything to my output. Okay, and that's how that works. And if exception is, throws an exception if file not exist, true. Okay, so then I'm going to come down here and I'm going, that just creates the file. That's all that's doing. Here I'm going to append, and I'm taking my imps to string. Okay, so my imps, again, is a J array, and I'm just dumping it out to a string. Then I'm going to loop to my for each. So a for each, in your type argument, you can change that. Okay, in this case, I know it's a J token, and we're going to go into here. Now I'm, again, looping through the imps. In this case, my imps is my J array. That's why I have J token array and an item. And then here, I'm going through here and just setting these values, okay? Once these values are set, so set title, I want set title to be date title. Now, if you notice here, item.select token, item to string. Now again, I'm not even gonna get details in these because I do have details in this video, but this is an introduction to Javelin, so I kind of want you to see how that works. Here in my SQL call, this gets kind of tricky. Even though it's an insert, I want to insert these values. So I do an @ sign, and it doesn't have to be P1, P2, but that's just pretty simple, right? And then in here, add the parameters. This is where it maps up. So P1 is going to equal data underscore user ID, which is up the top. So you can see set body. So set body is P4, okay? And that's how that works. Now, if I go over here, oh wait, I'm sorry, it should be local. Let's pull up SQL Server. And from here, let's just close these because I don't need them. Let's give that a second to open. There it is. Oh no, I don't have the password. So I'm not going to do it on the video. But again, I do have the video. It shows you how that works. If we go up to flow, what I was going to do is empty it out and delete it. Now notice that one's not connected. It's not important. But to run this, there's a couple things I can do. I can just run it. Okay. Now, if I run it, it's going to take a few minutes to run. But that's okay. Because now it's just pumping out the data over here, and it's going to loop through the array, and it's going to write everything to the database. So what this is doing is it's calling that string array, or I'm sorry, that string through the JSON file. It's looping through the JSON file, and it's writing all these values to that SQL server. Okay. I don't think I can stop it very cleanly once it's running. Okay, so that did. Now, I don't really care. That's fine. Say execution canceled by user. Sometimes that's moving so fast it's hard to stop it. Okay, now this is an OK log, right? So this is just the back end of the properties. The other things that you can do is run and debug. Now debug's kind of tricky because what debug is going to do is pop up the values for each one. So that one is here. Now the problem is I've lost that window. So that's why I said it's very tricky to get that window back up. Let's see if I can grab right here. It's just one of the minimum things. It's one of the minimum things that shouldn't be there that way. because I'll close and that goes to the next one. Okay, close to the next one. That showed me the value. So that one is actually that one. So it shows you the next one after it's been called. Now it's going to loop through variable 1. The problem is now it's going to loop through every one of these. And I can tell you there's 100 of them. Okay, so what that's doing is looping through the JSON. So I'm going to go ahead and stop it again. Okay, and we'll close that. And then we'll go back over here. So the debug is okay, but the problem is if you have a lot of data, it's going to get you caught up in that loop. Okay. So the other one I like to do is the verbose logging. So remember the logging we had? It was okay. If I don't want to get caught up in a loop, I can click here, and this will give me the exact same details that the debugging gave me. It's just writing it out for me. Okay. So that's the way I usually debug it. Well, I'll let it run for a second. The other things you can do is you can copy your values, which is here, your variables. You can also, let's go ahead and stop it. I can also run it by passing in a variable sheet. Okay, so if I need to assign the variables, again, those are a little bit, see now it's kind of tricky to stop. So now it doesn't want to stop. Okay, so that's fine. What we'll do, let's go over here and open up another one. So the concept of this is just to show you basically an introduction to how Javelin works. I was trying to see if there's a decent one I can open, but I don't really see one. So let's see, open from file. What do I have on my desktop? I should have a folder called flows. I do flows. So there's, is it move data? So this is taking data from this med site that I have, this database. This should work. From the adjusters, it's logging it. If I click in, I'm now selecting all these and I'm writing them to this temp data, and I'm doing a bulk activity mapping copy. Again, if you look over here, okay, this mapping feature, if the columns don't line up, then you can say this column equals this column, okay? But what this is doing a bulk copy, and it's copying into stage, okay? So it's taking my data from my non-stage and it's copying it to my stage. Now, if I go back up here, then we're taking it from stage, QA. So from right here, I'm taking the distinct values. I'm putting an output table. I'm now reading it into this data reader that I then push into this stage. Oh, so I'm cleaning up some data and then I'm pushing it back into stage. So let's run this one and see what it does. We'll do verbose logging. Aha. So we do have an error. That's okay. Reason being is because I should, so cannot insert duplicate. I normally should clean out that table before I do that, but that's okay. But the good news is you saw a log. And that's really how a lot of this works. Some of this, like I said, will be in your examples folder, or they're pretty easy to find, or just ping me if you have a question. I do have a lot of flows that I've worked on in the past. The biggest thing that you want to look at, I was trying to see if I can find the good one with the data table, but I'll have to find it. Let's see, more, nope. Yeah, I'll have to find the one with the data table because that one's a pretty good one. There's other things you can do like publishing jobs, TDM jobs. So if I need to publish a TDM job, oh, how wonderful. None of these. So I've upgraded Javelin since then, obviously. So I'll have to go figure out what those controls are and put them back. But that's okay. And then the one thing this does do, let's go to one that's not broke, is once you have one that's completed and you save it, these really are just files, okay? So if I go to desktop, there are physical files. Now, the physical files can be used for other things, like, for an example, Windows Scheduler, or you can write a batch file to execute it. And also, Javelin files can also fire off Javelin files. Now, let me show you this. Let's see, I need that. Because once you get your Javelins created, let's see, localhost. Let's dev test. Let's see, okay. So I don't remember what it is off the top of my head, so we'll go find one. looking for is this. Okay, and then I need this right here. So I use Azure for my servers, and I turn them off all the time. So when I do that, unfortunately, the IP address always changes. Okay, there we go. So if I come in here and look and just say advanced and let me in, it's just because the certificates aren't there, don't really care. And then we log in. Okay. Once you get your Javelin flows created and you really like them, there's a lot of things you can do with them. And again, look on my YouTube channel because I have a lot of good examples out there. But a few things that you want to do is you can run a Javelin through a job. So in my generators, if I need to create a job, so we'll click on this one. And that's, this is fine. I don't know what this is doing. AC, this isn't my project. It must be, if it is, it's very old, but that's okay. In fact, I may even error out on this. I probably should have picked one that I did. I think it's going to. So let's see if I can truly break it. Because I don't want that project. I might have truly broke it. Probably shouldn't refresh. What it was doing was it was hitting the profile. There we go. And it was trying to, what's cool project? Let's see. Let's go down to, let's pick a project again here. Let's see what's in that. So what it's doing is hitting the profile. Yeah, that's fine. Okay, gesture. That's what I was looking for. So it's hitting the profiles and it's pulling back the schema of the table. So if that profile doesn't work, it can't pull this back and it throws an error. Okay, so here in your actions. So when you come over here, what you do is you click on my service flows. Okay, and in my service flows, give it a second. Wait, I'm telling you wrong. Let's see. Give me 1 second. Oh, sorry, it's an orchestration. Click on this one. New workflow. Give it a name. Test. And then here you would upload your file. Okay. And then once it won't do it because I didn't do it. So we'll go ahead and hit cancel. And then if I go over here to my generators, click on this and give it 5 minutes to circle through. There we go. And then from here, I can say actions. And then once I do actions, I can say in my pre-publish, I can say create a publish action. And here we'll call it test action workflow. And then I would point it to my workflow to fire off. Now, the good news is that can be my pre-publish. I can do it my post-publish, or I can just do it whenever. So in other words, if I'm doing a pre-publish, maybe I'm checking to see if the IDs exist. Post-publish, maybe I'm cleaning out a temp table. So that's how you use it in the portal. So again, I kind of want to keep this simple. I didn't want to go crazy. If you go to my channel, just YouTube and look for my name, Tim Higgins, TDM. And in here, you'll see a whole list of TDM stuff. So if we go down to ARD, see, oops, did that pass up? Miscellaneous, yeah, Broadcom TDM. If I click on this, there's a whole bunch of TDM stuff in here. Javelin 101, 102. And these videos may even be better than the ones I'm doing right now. And then here's how to write extensions. So what that means is you can actually write code and you can create your own extensions. I don't truly recommend that. Use what's out of the box first, always. And then Javelin many tables to one dupes. So as you can see, I have a lot of examples in here. Javelin REST, I think that's the one I was just walking through a few seconds ago. REST data to CSV. So anyway, this is just an introduction. I hope it was useful. I was looking at it and talking to some colleagues, and they pointed out that I don't really have an introduction to Javelin. So that's why I've been doing this. Hope you all find this useful, and please reach out to me if you have any questions. Thank you.